Okay, so let's just jump right in.
Sounds good.
Have you ever, stopped and really thought about the words we use? Every day,
Uh-huh.
all the time.
Why is this thing a chair? Is there something actually chair-like about the word itself?
Or is it just, well, sounds we've all sort of agreed on?
Exactly. It sounds simple, maybe, but it's this question that goes way, way back, opens up some pretty deep water, philosophically speaking.
It really does. And it's
Uh-huh.
not just some modern puzzle linguists think about. Thinkers were wrestling with this thousands of years ago.
Totally. And that ancient wrestling match, especially when you compare it with modern thinking, that's really the focus for us today.
Right.
We've been digging into a bunch of sources, including bits related to Plato's dialogue, the Cratylus. That's where this debate really got started.
Yeah, and we've also got commentary that kind of bridges those ancient ideas to, contemporary language theories. So our mission really is to unpack all this for you. We want to explore the different viewpoints in Plato, dive into some examples from the text, and some are pretty wild, fair warning,
Oh, definitely.
and just see what insights we can get about, well, where language comes from and what it is, fundamentally.
Okay, so let's head back. Classical Greece. Plato's Cratylus.
Yeah. The dialogue basically kicks off with this clash, right? Two characters, polar opposite views on names.
On one side, you've got Hermogenes, and he's arguing that names are purely conventional, just agreement.
Meaning, like, we call a dog dog just because we all decided to, no deeper reason.
Exactly that. If we all agreed tomorrow to call it a blicket, then blicket would be its correct name. It's all custom, human agreement, arbitrary.
Okay. And the other guy,
That's Cratylus. He's the complete opposite. He thinks names are natural,
natural, meaning.
meaning there's some kind of inherent correctness, a natural fit between the name and the actual essence of the thing. It's not up to us. It's baked into reality somehow.
Wow, okay, so a name isn't just a label. It actually reflects what the thing is. That sounds hard to prove.
It does. And guess who steps into this debate?
Has to be Socrates.
Of course. And he does his usual thing. The source material mentions he often plays dumb, acts like he knows nothing, or maybe says he's inspired by someone else, like Euthyphro.
Yeah, his classic ironic approach.
Right. It's a strategy. He engages both Hermogenes and Cratylus, questions their extremes, often very playfully, trying to find some maybe middle ground.
And to really poke at Cratylus's natural names idea, Socrates dives into etymology. But, not etymology as we think of it now.
No, not by a long shot.
Yeah.
He starts examining the origins of names, yeah, but the derivations he comes up with are often incredibly speculative, fanciful, even funny.
Right.
The text suggests he's probably having a bit of fun, maybe gently mocking some of the linguistic theories floating around Athens at the time.
But he's also using it seriously in a way, to explore that natural fitness idea.
Exactly. He's testing the limits of the concept, even through these wild examples.
Okay, give us some examples. This sounds entertaining. The gods, maybe.
Oh yeah, the gods are great ones. He looks at Zeus and links his name, Zeus, to the concept of life through diazen. Makes sense for the king of the gods, maybe.
Okay, I can kind of see that one.
Or Ares, the god of war. He connects his name to Aaron, which means manhood or male, again linking the name to a perceived core quality: strength, masculinity.
So he's not just, matching sounds randomly. He's trying to find a connection between the name and the idea or the essence of the thing being named.
Precisely. And he does this with abstract concepts too, which gets even trickier, like justice dikaiosune. He links it to understanding of the just dikaiosemisis.
Okay.
But then he goes deeper into the word just itself, dikaion, and he describes it as this sort of subtle penetrating power. And he links the sound diason, meaning going through, to dikaion.
Whoa, okay, that feels like a stretch. But you can almost sort of hear him trying to make the sounds themselves reflect the concept. Penetrating, going through.
You can. And he gets even more specific about sounds. He suggests certain letters might naturally represent things, like the R sound suggests motion.
R for rush, run.
Maybe. And delta and tau D and T suggest binding or stopping, rest.
Huh. Like detain or stop?
Perhaps. Lambda, ill, for smoothness. Think liquid, flow. And then rougher sounds like feeth, psi, sigma, supfla, sup. He links those to windy things. Shivering, coolness.
So the actual physical feeling of making the sound is meant to mimic the thing.
That's the idea he's playing with. It doesn't matter if the specific examples are, historically accurate etymology, he's asking. Could sound itself imitate nature? Could language have started that way?
It's a really fascinating thought experiment, even if some of his examples are
Creative,
So
yeah. And the source notes he applies this to everything. Sun, moon, stars, earth, air, virtues, vices, pleasure, pain. He really goes for it.
he commits to the bit, you could say.
He definitely does. But after this long, playful exploration of the natural view, Socrates changes tack.
Right, he turns back to critique the original positions.
Yeah.
Hermogenes and Cratylus.
Exactly. First, he goes after Hermogenes' idea, pure convention. If
Right.
any name is correct just because you decide it is, right now, well, what happens to truth and falsehood?
Uh-huh.
Socrates asks, basically, if I point at you and just decide to call you table, is the statement, you are a table, suddenly true? Just because I said it with that intention?
No, obviously not.
Right. It seems to erase the possibility of being wrong when you name something,
Yeah.
which feels completely counterintuitive. We know we can misname things.
Okay, so pure convention doesn't quite work. What about Cratylus? Pure naturalism.
He critiques that too. Cratylus's idea was that a name is a perfect imitation of the thing's essence.
Right.
Socrates points out the absurdity. If a name were a perfect imitation, it wouldn't be a name or an image anymore. It would just be the thing itself.
Like a perfect portrait of you wouldn't be a portrait, it would just be another you.
Exactly. A perfect copy is just a duplicate. Names and images have to be different from the thing they represent to function as representations. They must fall short, in a way.
They need to be like the thing, but not be the thing.
Precisely. So where does Socrates land?
Somewhere in the middle.
Kind of. He suggests the language has elements of both. It's conventional and natural.
Mhm.
He uses this metaphor of a legislator, a wise name giver,
Okay.
who initially tries to craft names as imitations using sound, aiming for that natural fitness. But these imitations aren't perfect. Maybe the sounds aren't quite right, or the essence is hard to capture.
Because there are gaps, imperfections.
Yes, and that's where convention comes in. Usage, agreement, custom, they fill the gaps. They make the imperfect system work. The source sums it up nicely. The true conventional natural is the rational. It's a system grounded in imitation, but shaped by reason and use.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. A blend.
But Socrates isn't quite done. He ends with this really deep philosophical challenge aimed right at Cratylus and his underlying influence, the philosopher Heraclitus.
Heraclitus. The everything flows, everything is in constant change guy.
That's the one. Cratylus's idea of names capturing a fixed natural essence seems linked to that flux idea in a complicated way, but Socrates flips it. He asks, if everything is constantly changing, perpetually in flux,
Yeah.
how can we know anything at all? How can knowledge even exist? If beauty itself is always changing or goodness is never stable, how can you have knowledge of beauty or goodness?
Whoa. If the thing you're trying to know never stays the same, you can't pin it down to know it.
Exactly. If things are always becoming something else, they can't be something definite that can be known. This undercuts the idea of names reflecting a stable, knowable essence, which was kind of Cratylus's foundation.
So, wow, the debate about words really blew up into a debate about reality and knowledge.
Absolutely. That's often the case, isn't it? Language debates are proxies for these huge philosophical questions.
Okay, so that's the ancient setup. An amazing philosophical deep dive. Now, how does all this look from a modern perspective after, 2,000 plus years of language study?
Well, the commentary we looked at gives Plato, or Socrates through Plato, a lot of credit. His foresight was pretty remarkable.
In what way?
He saw that language isn't just arbitrary noise. He got that there is some kind of natural fitness sometimes. And he was definitely onto something with sound symbolism. The idea that sounds themselves can carry meaning, and the generally imitative aspect of language, even if his specific methods were, let's say, imaginative.
Right, his etymologies were wild, but the underlying intuition had something to it.
Exactly. But where modern views really differ is the how language comes about.
Not a single wise legislator making names.
No, definitely not. The modern understanding, as presented in our sources, is that languages aren't made like that.
Right.
They grow organically.
Like a plant or an ecosystem.
Sort of. It's seen as this massive, collective, often unconscious effort, spread over huge timescales involving entire communities, entire nations.
So it's not one genius, it's everyone. Over centuries.
Pretty much. The source material paints this picture of early humans, maybe driven by instinct, being the great makers of words, creating these almost like picture sounds. And then later, maybe more logic-driven people, the definers, came along and helped systematize things, create grammar.
Okay, so what are the key principles driving that growth, according to modern philology?
Well, imitation is still seen as fundamental, linking sounds to actions, feelings, objects. But crucially, it's not just about the speaker making a sound. A cry only becomes a word when a hearer understands it.
Ah, so it's social from the start. Communication, not just expression.
Exactly. The source says language is as much a creation of the ear as the tongue. Then there's analogy. That's huge.
Analogy.
Yeah, seeing patterns and extending them. If you learn walk becomes walked in the past tense, you can apply that pattern to talk, to get talked, even if you've never heard talked before.
Right, to build structure,
Yeah.
grammar, cases, tenses.
Precisely. Analogy brings order, creates relationships between words and concepts. It's how language gets its internal logic, even if that logic can be messy sometimes.
Makes sense. What else?
Onomatopoeia sound imitation is still considered, but maybe in a broader way than just moo or cuckoo.
How so?
It's seen more as a subtle formative principle. It might influence not just individual sounds, but the rhythm of speech, the way words are arranged in sentences, the overall feel.
Interesting.
And remember Socrates' ideas about specific letters, rho for motion, delta tau for stopping.
Yeah.
The commentary actually notes that modern observation seems to support some of that. Across different languages, certain sounds do seem to be intuitively associated with certain kinds of concepts.
Wow. So Plato was onto something specific there, even with his wild method.
It seems so. A little echo across the millennia.
Amazing. Any other big principles?
Differentiation, this is key. Meanings change. Word forms change. They diverge over time.
Why? What drives that?
All sorts of things. How words are used, the context they appear in, cultural shifts, associations people make. The source even mentions things like party spirit, changing the positive or negative feel of a word.
Like how a political term can shift.
Could be. And this is where Hermogenes, the convention guy, kind of gets his revenge.
Wow.
Because the commentary really stresses that ultimately usage is the king, custom. What the speech community actually does and understands, that's what determines correctness in the long run.
So even if a word started with some natural fitness, if people start using it differently, the usage wins out.
That seems to be the modern consensus presented here. Yeah. Convention, driven by the community, shapes the language over time.
Okay. So usage is key. What about things that stabilize language or keep changing it?
Well, things like sacred texts can fix a language for a while. The invention of writing and later printing obviously had a massive standardizing effect.
Right, creating a common reference.
And great literature. Influential writers that can set norms, create a kind of uniformity, but language keeps changing anyway.
What keeps it moving?
Things like our natural resistance to tautology. We don't like just saying the same thing in different ways, so we create nuances, new words, vocabulary grows, and then you have idioms.
Idioms like kick the bucket.
Exactly. Phrases where the meaning isn't just the sum of the parts. They show how much language relies on shared cultural understanding, history, association. You can't figure them out just from grammar rules.
It really does sound like a living thing, constantly shifting, growing, adapting.
That's very much the picture the source paints, a dynamic organism, part instinct, part collective effort, shaped by history, culture, individual creativity, constantly in transition. It's described as half dead, half alive, half solid, half fluid.
So trying to pin it down with rigid rules, like from grammar or philosophy, is always going to be incomplete.
Seems like it. The source also pushes back a bit against applying Darwinian natural selection too strictly to language change.
Oh, why is that?
It suggests that often language changes through milder forces, like just prevailing habit, slight shifts in usage, cultural trends. Not always this fierce competition where one word drives another to extinction. Sometimes, maybe, but often it's gentler.
Okay, so it's complex, not just one simple mechanism.
Definitely not. It's this incredibly intricate interplay of forces over vast amounts of time.
So we've journeyed from Plato's Athens, debating if chair is naturally chair-like or just agreed upon,
Right.
all the way to this modern view of language as this sprawling, evolving, almost biological system shaped by society, history, psychology.
It's quite a leap, but you can see the threads connecting them.
Absolutely. That core tension. Plato identified nature versus convention, inherent meaning versus social agreement. It feels like it's still buzzing underneath a lot of modern linguistics, doesn't it?
It really does. We're still exploring sound symbolism, how language shapes thought, how communities build meaning. Those ancient questions are still relevant frameworks.
Yeah. This deep dive, it's been quite the journey, from Socrates' playful etymologies to the complex, fluid models of today.
It shows how these fundamental questions about what language is and how it works, they just don't go away. They're timeless.
And it leaves me thinking, Despite all this incredible study, millennia of it, from Plato to modern science, the really deep origins, the absolute fundamental laws, maybe, that governed how language first sparked into life and how it keeps evolving, it still feels partly shrouded, doesn't it?
There's definitely still mystery there. Huge mystery.
Yeah, like there's this vast depth of human history and creativity and just raw instinct packed into the words we use every single day without even thinking about it. Maybe almost unknowable in its entirety.
It certainly makes you want to listen a bit more closely to the words coming out of your own mouth.
It really does. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive.